Well, matrics, in this lesson, what I want to revise is the cubic equation. From grade 10 days, the cubic equation. Okay, but we're going to extend the cubic equation into cubic equations that don't factorize using the grade 10 method. And we're going to be looking at a method called the method of inspection. You need this section of work for sketching cubic graphs, but don't worry about that now. Let's go and revise the cubic equation from grade 10 days, and we're going to be looking at the concept of grouping in pairs. Okay, grouping in pairs. Okay, now how does this work? Let's look at an example. Firstly, what is a cubic equation? Well, it looks something like this. X cubed minus 3x squared minus x plus 3 is equal to 0. You've got to solve for x. When there's an x cubed, it's cubic. If the x cubed was not there, we'd have a quadratic with the x squared. And if the x cubed and the x squared were not there, we'd have a linear or a straight line, negative x plus 3. So these two terms here form linear. Then we've got a quadratic if we bring in x squared. And when we bring in an x cubed, we're talking about a cubic equation. Now, how did we solve for x in grade 10? Let's revise that. We grouped in pairs. Okay, now what do you do here? Well, you look for a highest common factor. Well, what is the highest common factor between x cubed and negative 3x squared? Clearly, x squared. So let's take it out. So it's x squared, and what are you left with? X minus 3. Pretty much even grade 9 work is built into here. Now remember, here we don't have a common factor per se, so what we can do, but we can take out the negative. So if we take out a negative, and in other words we separate the negative from the x, what we have to do, if you remember, is change this plus to a minus. Okay, now check it. When you multiply out, you get negative x plus 3. If you multiply out here, x cubed minus 3x squared. It's still the same. Factorization is the reverse of multiplying. So you take out the common factor there. And you continue. If you remember, we've got a common bracket, so we take out the common bracket, and we're left with the x squared minus, and then what is it from grade 9 days? If you take out the whole thing, you're left with 1. Okay. And remember, if you check that, x minus 3, the bracket, multiplied by x squared gives you x squared into x minus 3. And then if you take this bracket, x minus 3, and subtract with negative 1, you get negative x minus 3. And then all you have to do is a difference of 2 squares. Now look at this. X squared minus 1 is x plus 1, and x minus 1. And notice, you've got 3 factors of the cubic equation. And if you then solve for x, you get x is equal to 3, or x is equal to negative 1, or x is equal to 1. Those are your solutions there. Okay, they're solutions to this equation. And notice that they are all factors of this guy. This is the constant term here. This 3, it's got no x's in. And all of these solutions are factors of 3. Now, let's explore this idea of a solution to equation, because this is going to be very important to what we're doing in the section. Okay, so if I look at x equals 3, now watch this. If I take x equals 3, why is it a solution of the cubic equation? Well, let's have a look. If we take the equation, we split it into the left side. What is the left side of the equation? Well, we know it's x cubed minus 3x squared minus x plus 3. That is the left side. The right side, if you think about it, what is the right side? The right side is equal to 0. Look at it again. That's the equation up top there. The left side is this expression, and the right side is 0. So, when you test x equals 3 to see if it's a solution, what you need to do is you need to substitute it in. Okay, so I'm going to substitute it into the left-hand side there, and let's see what we get. Well, 3 cubed is 27 minus, okay, 9 times 3, and 3 squared is 9 times 3 is 27, subtract 3 plus 3, and all of these give you 0, which is the right-hand side. The left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. So why is x equals 3 a solution? When you substitute it into the left side of the equation, it comes to the right side. In other words, plugging in 3 into the equation forces this equation to come out to be 0, which is the right side. Therefore, it's a solution. If it didn't, if the right side did not come to naught, if it came to something else, then x equals 3 would not be a solution. What about the other guys? What about x equals negative 1? Let's test x equals negative 1 and see what we get. Well, what is the left-hand side? Or the left side is going to be negative 1 cubed minus 3 times negative 1 squared. We're substituting into the equation. Subtract negative 1 plus 3. Well, let's see what we get. Negative 1 cubed is negative 1. Now, careful. The minus 1 squared is positive 1. Minus and a minus is a plus. There we go. So what do we have? Negative 1. And this 3 times 1 is 3. Plus 1 plus 3. So this is negative 4 plus 4 is 0, which equals the right-hand side. So therefore, we can conclude that the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. And therefore, x equals minus 1 is a solution. Great. Alright, if we take the other value, let's look at x as 1. Let's see if it is a solution. Let's test x is equal to 1. So let's try it. What's the left-hand side going to give you? Well, 1 cubed minus 3 times 1 squared minus 1 plus 3. So it's 1, subtract 3, subtract 1 plus 3. Look at that, naught. Okay, 1 minus 3 is negative 2 minus 1, negative 3 plus 3 is naught, which is the right-hand side. And guess what? The left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. Therefore, 1 is most definitely a solution to that equation. Okay, now notice something else, people. If you go up and have a look here, we've got these 3 solutions. So these guys over here are called solutions. Another word for them could be roots of the equation, solutions. And these guys up top here are referred to as the factors of the equation. Okay, now have a look here. If we take a way that we're going to need to do is if you've got x equals 3, you found out that that's a solution. Okay, it's a solution. Remember, if you bring it across the equals, this guy becomes what we call a factor. It's one of the factors of that equation. If x is equal to negative 1 is a solution, what do we then do? We can say, bring that across. X plus 1 is naught, and once again, that becomes a factor. There's actually 3 factors here. If x is 1, is a solution, which they are. We substituted them in, and we realized that they were solutions, these guys. So if you bring that across, then what do we call this guy? A factor. Okay, and that's an important thing as well with a factor. Okay, the other thing that's quite interesting that I want to show you as well, before we plunge into the new work, I want you to have a look at this cubic equation. What do you notice here? Now I'm going to circle this. You'll probably agree with me. I'm just going to take that and I want to rewrite that and explain a few concepts here. If you take that x minus 3, so let's write it down here. If you look at that, you've got x minus 3, okay, and then what have we got here? We've got in brackets here x squared minus 1. Okay, now, and that equals, of course, naught, so no problem there. But now watch this. This guy here, this pink expression is one of the linear factors, is a linear factor. This expression, which is really x squared, 1x squared, there's a naught x there, there's a minus 1. This guy is called a quadratic factor, which of course you can then express as 2 linear factors. Okay, so, and remember, so the solutions, the 3, the minus 1 and the 1, give you the factors, but one of the factors is a linear factor and the other one can be a quadratic. Look at that, x squared minus 1. So one is linear and one is quadratic. Right, let's have a look at one more example before the practice example on solving for x used in a cubic equation. Have a look at this one. This is a second example. If you take 2x cubed minus x squared minus 8x plus 4, we're going to use the technique of grouping from grade 10 days to solve for x. Okay, now watch this. Let's group these in pairs. Take out the x squared, and what are we left with? 2x minus 1. Now take out negative 4, and what are we left with? 2x minus 1. Notice that these are always pretty much the same, these brackets. But let's check it. If we multiply out, we get 2x cubed minus x squared. Great, so those two are sorted. Negative 8x plus 4. Sorted. Okay, now we can take out the brackets, 2x minus 1, and we're left with x squared minus 4. Now what do you notice? There's a linear factor here, and there's a quadratic factor here. Okay, and what can we then do? We can then, of course, factorize further. Okay, this one is nice because it's a difference of 2 squares. So there we go. X plus 2, x minus 2. So 2x minus 1 is 0. 2x is equal to 1. There we go. And what is your x equal to? It's a fraction. X is half. Not really a factor per se of 4. They're of the constant term, but doesn't matter there. Or x equals negative 2 is one of the factors, or x is equal to 2. So there's 3 solutions to the equation. These two are factors of the equation. Can you see there? And we've got a linear and a quadratic here. So the important thing to remember is that before we move on into the practice example, that the solutions, if you focus on that number 4, all or some of the solutions are factors of that expression, of that number there, and then the solutions can be written as the factors over here. These guys are factors, and once you've got one factor, you can get a linear factor and a quadratic, and there you go, and you can solve for x.